ultimatum that shook San Antonio? Victor Wembanyama is not asking the Spurs for a favor. He is asking them to look him in the eye and admit what the entire NBA already knows. He is not just their best player, he is their future, their empire, and maybe the most valuable young superstar basketball has seen in a generation. And now San Antonio has a problem, because after a finals run that ended in heartbreak, after blown leads, painful fourth quarters, and a series that slipped away one mistake at a time, Wembanyama's contract situation has become the biggest story in the league. The reports are simple, but the meaning behind them is explosive. Pay him properly, respect his value, or risk damaging the relationship with the one player this franchise cannot afford to lose. This is not normal NBA business. This is not just another young star waiting for a rookie extension. This is Victor Wembanyama, the 7'4" phenomenon who turned the Spurs from a rebuilding team into a finals threat almost overnight. He defended the rim like a wall, scored like a guard, stretched the floor, carried pressure, and became the center of everything San Antonio wants to become. But here is the uncomfortable truth. While Wembanyama was producing like a franchise-changing superstar, he was still being paid like a player trapped inside the rookie contract system. For most players, that is just part of the process. For Victor, it feels different because his value is not just measured in points, rebounds, blocks, or awards. His value is measured in tickets sold, jerseys moved, national TV attention, global fans, and the belief that San Antonio can build another dynasty. So now the Spurs are standing at a dangerous crossroads. They can treat this like paperwork, offer the biggest number the rulebook allows, and hope that is enough. Or they can understand what this moment really is. A loyalty test, a respect test, a franchise-defining test. Because Wembanyama is watching, his camp is watching, the whole league is watching, and if the Spurs get this wrong, the damage may not show up today. It may show up years from now, when the greatest talent they ever drafted starts wondering if his future belongs somewhere else. Where are you watching from right now? Comment your city below. If you think the Spurs must give Wembanyama everything he wants, press 1. If you think San Antonio should protect the team's flexibility, press 2. And don't forget to subscribe, because this story is only getting more dangerous from here. The most underpaid superstar in basketball. The most uncomfortable part of this entire story is not that Victor Wembanyama wants a massive contract. The uncomfortable part is that almost nobody can seriously argue he has not already earned it. For San Antonio, the rookie contract system has been a gift. They found a generational player, built the entire franchise around him, watched him become the face of their future, and still paid him far below what his impact actually creates. That is how the NBA system works. But with Wembanyama, the gap feels almost impossible to ignore. This is not a young player putting up empty numbers on a losing team. This is not potential waiting to become production. This is already production. This is elite defense, franchise-level offense, playoff pressure, global attention, and a finals run before most stars even understand what the NBA postseason truly demand. And that is where the tension begins. Because every time Wembanyama blocks a shot, sells out an arena, changes a national TV schedule, or brings international attention to San Antonio, the Spurs are receiving superstar value at a rookie price. In normal business terms, that is a miracle. In player relationship terms, it can become dangerous. Players understand money differently than fans do. For fans, millions are millions. But inside the NBA, contracts are not just salaries. They are status. They are respect. They tell the locker room, the league, and the player himself where he stands in the hierarchy. So when Wembanyama looks around and sees other stars making more, even players with less impact, the message becomes complicated. The Spurs may not be insulting him directly, the rules may be limiting what they can do, but if the final structure feels too safe, too team-friendly, or too controlling, Wembanyama's camp will notice. And that is why San Antonio cannot treat this like a normal extension. They are not just paying for the next 5 years. They are protecting the next 15, because once a superstar feels undervalued, the money is only part of the problem. The real issue becomes trust. And trust, once cracked, is much harder to repair than a salary sheet. The finals collapse that changed everything. The Spurs did not lose the finals because they were hopeless. That is what makes this story so painful. They were close. Painfully close. Close enough to see the championship door open. Close enough to feel momentum shifting. Close enough to believe the basketball world was about to witness the beginning of a new dynasty in San Antonio. And then they let it slip away. Against the Knicks, the Spurs kept building leads they could not protect. Double-digit cushions disappeared. Fourth quarters turned into survival tests. Every mistake felt louder. Every missed shot heavier. Every defensive breakdown more expensive. For a young team, This was the kind of lesson that leaves scars. Wembanyama was not the reason San Antonio collapsed. He was the reason they were there in the first place. He gave them rim protection, scoring, spacing, and the kind of presence that changes every possession. Even when the Spurs looked shaky, he looked like the one piece that could survive the brightest lights. But the finals exposed the difference between talent and championship maturity. New York had poise. The Knicks had veterans who understood how to punish hesitation. Jalen Brunson controlled moments. Karl Anthony Towns gave them size and experience. Their role players stayed calm when San Antonio rushed. And every time the Spurs opened the door, New York walked through it. That matters because Wembanyama saw everything. He saw leads vanish. He saw possessions get wasted. He saw how thin the margin becomes when a championship is on the line. And after a loss like that, a superstar does not just ask, "How much will you pay me?" He asks, "Are you serious about winning?" That is the hidden pressure behind this extension. Wembanyama is not only evaluating the number, he is evaluating the plan, the roster, the urgency, the front office's willingness to make hard decisions, because after getting that close, someday is no longer good enough. Why Wembanyama is different. There are stars, there are superstars. And then there are players who make the entire league rethink what basketball is supposed to look. Victor Wembanyama belongs in that last category. He is not just tall. The NBA has seen height before. He is not just skilled. The league has seen skilled big men before. What makes Wembanyama terrifying is the combination. He protects the rim like an old-school defensive anchor, moves like a wing, shoots like a modern forward, and sees the floor with a patience most young players do not have. That is why his value is so difficult to measure. A normal box score cannot fully explain him. A block from Wembanyama does not just stop one shot. It changes the next 5 possessions because guards start thinking twice before entering the paint. A three-pointer from him does not just add points. It drags a big defender away from the rim and opens the floor for everyone else. His presence bends the game, and he is still young. That is the frightening part for the rest of the NBA. He has already reached a level most players never touch, and he has not even entered his prime. His body will get stronger, his reads will get faster, his chemistry with teammates will improve, the playoff losses will become fuel instead of trauma. This is why the Spurs cannot afford to think small. When you have a player like this, the window does not open slowly. It can explode open. One right move can turn you into a dynasty. One wrong move can make the player question whether the organization is ready for his ambition. Wembanyama is not simply trying to become great. He is trying to become historic. That means every decision around him has to match that level because generational players do not wait forever for franchises to catch up. The rulebook versus reality, the NBA's contract system was built to create order, but sometimes order creates tension. That is exactly what is happening with Victor Wembanyama. On paper, the rules are clear. Rookie extensions have limits. Award triggers matter. Salary percentages matter. Timing matters. The CBA decides what teams can offer, when they can offer it, and how much a young superstar can actually make before reaching later stages of his career. But reality does not always care about paper. Reality says Wembanyama has already outgrown the system. Reality says he has produced like a top-tier superstar while still being locked inside a structure designed for players who are still proving themselves. Reality says he should not have to keep demonstrating what everyone can already see. That is why the award language matters so much. If Wembanyama reaches certain marks, the deal can climb toward a much larger number, but from his side, that may feel backwards. Why should a player who has already carried a franchise to the finals need another season of validation? Why should the Spurs wait for more proof when the proof has been on the floor every night? San Antonio can hide behind the rules, but that would be dangerous. Because players do not only remember what teams are legally allowed to do, they remember what teams fought to do. They remember whether the front office searched for every possible advantage, every favorable clause, every sign of trust. That is where this negotiation becomes bigger than math. The Spurs must show Wembanyama they are not just following the CBA. They are maximizing it for him. They are saying, we understand the rules, but we also understand your value. That difference may decide whether this extension feels like a celebration or a warning sign. The player option that could change everything. The biggest battle in this contract may not be the headline number. It may be the exit door. That is why the player option is so important. For fans, it sounds like fine print. For Wembanyama, it could be power, flexibility, and protection. For the Spurs, it could be the difference between total control and a future where they must keep earning his loyalty. A 5-year deal with no player option gives San Antonio comfort. It locks Wembanyama into the franchise for the full term. The Spurs can plan around him, build slowly, manage the cap, and know their cornerstone is not going anywhere. But from the player's side, comfort for the team can feel like restriction. A player option changes the tone. It tells Wembanyama, "We are not trapping you. We believe we can keep you because we will keep building the right way." That kind of confidence matters, especially with a superstar who already knows he will have massive leverage later. At age 27, Wembanyama could be entering the strongest stretch of his career. By then, he may have more All-NBA selections, more defensive awards, deeper playoff runs, maybe even a championship. If he has a player option, he could re-enter the market at the perfect moment and command a contract that makes today's numbers look small. That is exactly why his camp will want it, and that is exactly why the Spurs may hesitate. Because giving a player option means accepting pressure. It means San Antonio cannot simply sign him and relax. They must keep proving the plan is real. They must build winning rosters, communicate clearly, and treat him like the foundation every year, not just during negotiation. But maybe that is what this relationship needs. A player like Wembanyama should not be kept by control. He should be kept by belief, trust, and championship ambition. The global brand behind the jersey, Victor Wembanyama is not just changing the Spurs on the court. He is changing their business. Before he arrived, San Antonio was respected. The Spurs had banners, history, culture, and one of the greatest organizational reputations in basketball. But they were not a global glamour team like the Lakers, Warriors, or Celtics. They were admired more than they were marketed. Wembanyama changed that instantly. Suddenly, San Antonio games became must-watch television. International fans paid attention. Casual viewers wanted highlights. Every block, every deep three, every impossible move turned into content. He did not just improve the team. He expanded the audience. That is why his contract conversation cannot be separated from his commercial value. A normal star helps a team win. A global star changes how the world sees the franchise. Wembanyama brings France, Europe, young fans, sneaker companies, sponsors, and broadcasters into the conversation. His value travels far beyond the box score. And that creates another layer of pressure. If Nike or another major brand views Wembanyama as a lifetime-level basketball figure, then the Spurs cannot act like he is just another max player. If the marketplace sees him as the future face of the sport, San Antonio must make sure its own offer sends the same message. Because players notice when outside companies value them more boldly than their own franchise does, that kind of imbalance can become dangerous. Imagine hearing sneaker executives talk about legacy, global reach, signature lines, and lifetime branding, while your NBA team talks mostly about cap rules and flexibility. One conversation feels like belief. The other can feel like caution. The Spurs have to avoid that mistake. They need to make Wembanyama feel that San Antonio is not just where he plays. It is where his legend can grow, where his brand, his championship goals, and his personal identity can all rise together. Because in today's NBA, superstars do not only choose teams, they choose platforms. The roster decision San Antonio cannot avoid. Paying Wembanyama is only the first move. The next question is harder. What kind of team are the Spurs actually building around him? Because after a finals loss, running it back sounds safe, but safe is not always enough. San Antonio has young talent, real promise, and a foundation most teams would dream of. But the finals expose the difference between having talent and having the right championship pieces. De'Aaron Fox gave the Spurs speed, creation, and veteran presence. He helped push the offense into a new gear, but the playoffs also raised questions. Is he the perfect long-term second star next to Wembanyama? Can his contract fit once the young core becomes expensive? Can he close the biggest games when the pressure gets cruel? Those questions will not disappear. At the same time, Stephon Castle and Dylan Harper represent the future. They are younger, cheaper, and still growing. If they develop quickly, San Antonio may have to decide whether the smarter move is to build around Wembanyama and the young guards instead of keeping an expensive veteran structure. That is not an easy decision. Fox helped them win now. But Wembanyama's timeline may force the Spurs to think bigger than one season. They need shooting, they need toughness, they need players who can protect leads, survive playoff pressure, and punish defenses that overload on Victor. Most importantly, they need clarity. A superstar can accept patience if the plan makes sense. He can accept development if he believes the organization is moving with purpose. But what he cannot accept is confusion. He cannot watch the Spurs hesitate while his prime approaches. The finals showed San Antonio is close, but close is dangerous. Close can make a franchise overrate itself. Close can convince a front office that small growth is enough. Wembanyama will not want small growth. He will want proof that the Spurs are serious about turning pain into power. The three ways this story can end. There are three possible endings to the Victor Wembanyama contract story, and none of them are small. The first ending is the one San Antonio desperately wants. a clean agreement. The Spurs give Wembanyama the strongest structure possible. His camp feels respected, the player option is handled carefully, and both sides walk away with the same message: this is still home. That ending keeps the dynasty dream alive. It tells the locker room that the franchise is stable. It tells the fans that the future is protected. And most importantly, it tells Wembanyama that San Antonio sees him not just as a great player, but as the foundation of everything. But even that clean ending requires more than a signature. The Spurs still have to prove the contract is connected to a real championship plan. Wembanyama will not be satisfied with money alone if the roster around him does not keep improving. He has already tasted the finals. He has already felt what it means to be close and still walk away with nothing. That kind of pain changes a superstar. It raises the standard. It makes every front office move feel personal. The second ending is more dangerous. The deal gets done, but the trust gets bruised. Maybe the number is huge, but the terms feel too controlled. Maybe the Spurs refuse the player option. Maybe the incentive language feels like San Antonio is asking him to prove something he already proved. Publicly, everyone smiles. Privately, something feels different. That is how NBA relationships begin to shift. Not all at once, not with one dramatic press conference. It starts quietly. A player remembers a negotiation, an agent remembers a conversation, a front office remembers a demand, then one losing streak comes, one bad playoff exit, one report from another team watching the situation. Suddenly, what looked like a small contract disagreement becomes part of a much bigger story. The third ending is the nightmare scenario. San Antonio misreads the entire moment. They assume control is the same as loyalty. They assume restricted rights are enough. They assume Wembanyama will stay just because Tim Duncan stayed, just because the Spurs have history, just because the organization has culture. That would be a mistake. Wembanyama is not living in the old NBA. He has global leverage. He has business power. He has a brand that reaches beyond San Antonio. He has a clear understanding of what he means to the franchise, to the league, and to the future of basketball. If he ever feels like the Spurs are treating him as something they own instead of someone they must keep earning, every team in the league will start dreaming. And that is the real danger here. The Spurs do not have to lose him today to damage tomorrow. They only have to plant one seed of doubt. One feeling that the organization values control more than partnership. One sense that the front office is more worried about winning the negotiation than building the relationship. For a normal player, maybe that fades. For a generational player, it stays. That is why San Antonio needs clarity fast. Pay him the right way. Build around him the right way. Speak to him the right way. Do not let this become a cold business battle when it should be the beginning of a historic partnership. Because the worst outcome is not giving Victor Wembanyama too much power. The worst outcome is making him wonder whether his biggest dreams need a bigger stage. The lesson San Antonio must learn. The lesson for the Spurs is simple, but it may decide the next 15 years of their franchise. When a generational player lands in your hands, you do not manage him like an asset. You build a relationship with him like a partner. You do not just calculate his salary. You calculate his trust. You do not just protect your cap sheet. You protect the belief that he can become everything he is supposed to become in your jersey. That is what this entire situation is really about. Not just money, not just contracts, not just player options, CBA rules, award bonuses, or salary projections. Those things matter, but they are only the surface. Underneath all of it is a bigger question. Does San Antonio truly understand who Victor Wembanyama is? He is not simply the best player on the roster. He is the reason the Spurs are relevant again. He is the reason national television cares. He is the reason fans in San Antonio can look at the future and see banners instead of rebuilds. He is the bridge between the Tim Duncan past and the next great era of Spurs basketball. And if San Antonio wants that future, they must treat him with the seriousness that future demands. Strategically, the Spurs need three things. First, they must give Wembanyama the most respectful contract structure possible. Not just the biggest legal number, but the strongest signal of belief. If that means flexibility, give him flexibility. If that means clear incentives, make them fair. If that means a player option that forces the organization to keep earning his commitment, then maybe that pressure is healthy. Second, the Spurs must prove the roster plan is real. Wembanyama cannot be asked to carry everything alone while the front office hides behind patience. Patience is important, but urgency matters too. The finals showed that San Antonio is close, but also showed exactly where they are fragile. They need maturity, they need late game execution. They need players who can survive when every possession feels like a judgment. Third, communication must be honest. No cold corporate language, no empty public statements, no pretending that money does not matter when everyone in the league knows it does. Sit down with the player, his camp, the coaching staff, and the people who shape the future of the team. Tell the truth. Listen carefully. Build trust before the noise becomes bigger than the mission. The human lesson is just as important. Greatness should be valued before it becomes frustrated. Loyalty should be earned, not assumed. Respect should be shown when the relationship is strong, not only when it is in danger. And young stars should not have to wonder whether the organization they are carrying truly sees them. Wembanyama also has a responsibility. He must lead with patience, professionalism, and maturity. San Antonio gave him a platform, a culture, and a chance to build something rare. The best ending is not conflict. The best ending is partnership, a peaceful, respectful agreement where both sides understand the mission and choose to move forward together. Because if the Spurs get this right, this is not the beginning of a contract dispute. It is the beginning of a dynasty. But if they get it wrong, the mistake will not just be measured in dollars. It will be measured in trust lost, years wasted, and the painful possibility that the greatest player they ever drafted could one day imagine his legacy somewhere else. So now the pressure is on San Antonio. Pay him like the future, build around him like the present, respect him like the cornerstone, and never forget that players like Victor Wembanyama do not come around twice. Now tell me what you think. Should the Spurs give Wembanyama everything he wants? Press 1 if yes, press 2 if you think the team must protect flexibility. Comment where you are watching from, subscribe to the channel, like this video, and share it with another NBA fan who needs to see what is coming next.